but sailors had tattoos. Now all of a sudden, you say everyone's got one. So I'm wondering, we were just sort of wondering why. And it's a funny thing because some people think tattoos are horrible. Some people think they're great. But if you're from Fiji or the Solomon Islands, it's a natural thing to have. Funny, isn't it? Just sort of a lot strange.
If you fell off the ship and you had a tattoo, you could be identified anywhere.
Mike's saying if you fell off a ship and you had a tattoo, you could be identified anywhere.
Well, no, it was done as a declaration.
Yeah, but you could still be identified.
No. Well, yes, you could, but that's not why people had tattoos. They had tattoos because it was decoration. They were hundreds of pounds. I know.
But you haven't got a tattoo, have you?
No, I don't like them. I've often wondered why people do them. It's a thing from somewhere else. It's like McDonald's, I suppose. It's come from somewhere else. Now everybody has one. But of course, the Germans tattooed people. We know that. Yeah, so maybe identification. Yeah.
Are you talking about the camps?
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously. But the other thing as well is, I think I know it's Hollywood, but if you watch the film Gladiator, it states quite clearly that gladiators were legionaries were identified by their legionary stamp. They would have their legion tattooed onto them.
But not a golden eagle tattooed on your back. Yeah.
Well, not like that, but it'd be the number of the legion, i.e. the second org or the 20 VV Valia Vitrix. So that's what we could be talking about.
So it does go back a long way, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and obviously Otto the Iceman 5,500 years ago. So that's and also we're getting back to what you said about the Chinese. We're getting people and do you know what that lecture that we did about Mongolia and all these other cultures?
Yeah.
So that's another thing there as well.
Yeah, interesting. No, that's only thought of something I throw into the ring this morning. That's...
Did you say the ring? Did you say? You didn't say what I thought you said. Right. Okay, Henry, is there any other news from you before we get?
They found the dairy farmer's milk float from 3,500 years ago in Pembrokeshire.
Oh. Wow.
They found evidence of Neolithic dairy farming.
And they found a milk float?
With the return bottles on it.
God's sake.
No, they've done an excavation where they found evidence in pottery of milk fat.
Yeah. Oh no, the lactic acids, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that was being really experimented with in the late 1990s by a Professor Sherratt from Oxford University, and it was groundbreaking then. But now by traces on pottery, we can actually work out. We can work out where goat milk or sheep's milk or you've got cow's milk or horse's milk can be traceable. Yeah. So, oh no, that's pretty good. So, Mike, any news from you this week, lovely?
The steps were steeper today.
The steps were steeper today.
Yeah.
Did you really want to share that with us?
No, but it puffed me right out.
It puffed you right out. Oh, okay, fair enough. Right. There's been lots of bits of news this week, so I've got one to share with you. So I've just got to get this up on the screen, so if you can bear with me. It's a scientific discovery. So let's share with that. So if I get onto the screen and we can go with this and let's record this. There you go. Good. And where are we? And let's show this on you. Right, there you go. Brilliant. Right, so scientists discover medieval warrior given lavish burial 1,000 years ago was likely non-binary.
Oh my God.
Shut
Oh
up.
God.
Right, no, you got it. No, just stop. Modern analysis of a grave found in Finland 50 years ago challenges traditional beliefs about gender roles in the Iron Age. Sorry, I got to do this straight. And early medieval times that suggest that non-binary people may have been valued members of these communities, right? Yeah? Do you know what non-binary means, Mike? They don't identify as male or female. The result published in the European Journal of Archaeology reassessed the grave that is at least 1,000 years old, which was first discovered in Hattula, Finland, where a sword with a bronze handle was found. Earlier studies of the grave had concluded, based on the jury and other evidence, that the site was likely a double burial of both a woman and a man, or a weapon grave of a female, indicating the presence of strong female leaders or even female warriors in the late Iron Age in Finland. However, according to the current study by scientists, including those from the University of Turku in Finland, only one person wearing typically feminine clothes and a hilt less sword placed on their left hip had been buried in the grave. Based on analysis of DNA collected from the site, the researchers said the buried individual may have had the sex chromosome XXY or Klinefelter syndrome with male and female anatomical features. So in other words, XXY is a very masculine female. You come across them, haven't you, Mike?
Yeah.
The scientists, however, emphasized that the DNA analysis was based on a very small data set. And it goes on to say, well, this looks like it's the sword. There you go, sword, nice sword. And I can tell you what I think of this in a minute. According to a candidate from the University of Turku, the buried individual may have been a highly respected member of their community and was laid in the grave on a soft feather blanket with valuable furs and objects. The individual may be an example of someone whose social identity settles outside the traditional divisions of gender. If the characteristics of the XXY chromosome had been evident on the person, the researchers say the individual might have been considered strictly a female or a male in the early... Shut up! We have no way of knowing the gender's identity in the grave. Oh, for God's sake. What we know is that the person was given an elaborate burial in a female-type dress with furs, feathers and a sword, with another sword possibly placed in the grave later. So in other words, that's proof that there's been this transgender thing going on for years. But based on the results, the scientists speculate that in early medieval Finland, which is often considered a masculine and warlike society, there may have been some individuals who did not fit in a binary gender model. These individuals could also have been respected and considered important, and their gender identities could be elaborately represented and remembered in the content of their burials. Oh, so in other words, what do you think about that, Goff?
Oh, I just don't know what to say. I mean, yeah, it's just crap, isn't it?
Right.
Meaningless. So what?
All I can say, right, is that it takes away everything that I've been trying to say for the past few years. So if in Viking society, not Norwegian and Danish Viking society, not Finnish society, because they're just a bit weird, right? And you've got to go through Sweden before you get to Norway anyway, so we'll forget about Finland, right? But the fact of the matter is, I shouldn't be saying this, but the fact of the matter is, obviously, there have been burials found in Norway of females with swords. And then you look at the bone structure of the female, and that's obviously clear evidence that that female was a warrior.
Yep.
You know, and there's the other one, isn't there? There's the burial that was found with blacksmithy tools, and one archaeologist said that the blacksmithing tools were obviously from her dad. But then the other archaeologist said, if you look at the bone structure on the right arm, particularly the humerus, you can see that is much wider than the bone structure on the left hand side, right? So that proves that the female was a blacksmith. Now what we're told to believe is that those two burials in Norway don't actually represent males or females; they represent bisexuals.
Yeah, it's funny how they can get like a tiny bit of information and come up with this theory. That's sort of, you know, like it doesn't mean anything. It's
and I've got to be honest with you.
So it was non-binary. Still, like Hit was non-binary. So what? It doesn't mean anything. It's nothing new, is it?
The thing is, what is actually the thing is, it's also to do with the custom of their dress back then. It might be seen to be feminine today, but then again, you know what I mean? I'm with you on this one, Goff. We're not going to take Henry's opinion because that's just going to be so blasé. Go on, Henry. Let's give your opinion. You don't want to talk to us.
I sent it to you.
Oh,
I sent it to you.
A stag night that went wrong. And the turkey like that.
I think that makes sense.
The turkey loved that one. Didn't you, Baldrick? Yeah, he's loving it. He's loving it. He's loving it. Oh, God. Right, okay. So what I wanted to do, we have a bit of a late start, everyone. Mike, you were supposed to be here at 10:30. Henry was supposed to be here at 10:30. Me and Goff have been waiting since 9:10. Isn't that right, Goff?
Yeah.
My bus was late.
Oh, yeah, your bus was late. Henry, was your bus late as well?
It never turned up.
All right. So, yes.
I think I've answered that other question.
Might have an answer. Just looked at the side by side map. It's located at Summer House. 1880 human remains found, and this is what. Just for the sake of argument. This is the image that wonderful Henry was talking about from Lantwick Major. This is on Dimlands Road.
Oh yeah.
You know the weird cross on the road.
Yeah, yeah.
Hang on, let's just show this. Do you know I've heard about this so many times, and I've never seen it myself. Is that the one we're talking about, Goff? I know it's a really dark image.
I think so. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've often wondered about this. Anyway, thanks for that. Thanks for bringing us to that attention. Right. So now, finally, we're going to get on with what we're meant to be doing today. So, oh, thank God for that. Hey, it could be worse, right? My excuses for turning up to the Lantwick Major class were always genuine, right? But when it comes to the Bridgend class, I always ran out of excuses.
We noticed.
And, oh God, I forgot I forgot. Oh no! Shut up.
We used to have a sweepstake on which excuse we were going to get.
So what we're going to do today, we're going to look at. Is that nice and clear, Mike?
Yes.
It's lovely. It's great. So what we're looking at today is the reuse of Anglo-Saxon architecture, or moreover, what I do today is explain what Anglo-Saxon architecture is all about, and whether it's a specific form of architecture. What we discussed on Tuesday was that in many ways, the Anglo-Saxons copied everything from every other culture, and they didn't really offer us anything new. which is quite a sweeping statement, because I spent about 2 hours on Tuesday, regrettably saying that, you know, how wonderful Anglo-Saxon architecture is, not wanting to do it. And then at the end, we came up with this conclusion that actually it was mainly copied from Roman civilization, Pictish civilization, British civilization, anything else other than introducing their own style, which in many ways is not really fair. I think you can make up your own mind on this. But what we do, we look at Ringsworth Church and we look at Bakewell Church, both churches in Derbyshire up in the north. And what I try to do is just to give another slant on how to identify Anglo-Saxon stuff. And there is no real evidence of any Anglo-Saxon architecture in South Wales. There's a little bit in East Wales, but not really in South Wales. Except if you go to Lisworney Church in the Vale of Glamorgan. If you go to Lisworney Church in the Vale of Glamorgan, alongside the porch, a little bit further over, you can see a wonderful carved stone, which is completely out of character and has been reused in the fabric of the later medieval church at Lisworney. But that could be a red herring. So if we sort of use this image and then we sort of go on, this is a piece of dressed stone that's actually been reused in the Norman to later medieval porch. And we will look at this again. And what we're not going to do is revisit this church, which is Brixworth Church, which is in Northamptonshire. So what we're going to do, I'm going to look at my notes. Again, we're going to say reuse of material, and we're going to have this with us. And that's going in quite well. Nice. The one thing that all that stone, right? And the one thing that stands out immediately is, even though that's all stone from All Saints Church, Earl Barton in Northamptonshire, even though that's all stone, that looks very familiar to us. And the reason why that looks very familiar to us, it looks like it's been carved as if the stonemason was carving into wood. So that's a little bit of detail where I would like to go. So when we think about the Anglo-Saxon period, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that over there. What we know about, what we think about the Anglo-Saxon period is that it's not so much a period, it's an architectural historical period in Britain, right? In moreover England and the borders of Wales, in East Wales. So is the Anglo-Saxon period a great invasion of people over from Europe? Lots of us archaeologists believe no, it wasn't. It was groups of people coming over from Europe, like migrants today. A few hundred this year, a dozen the next year, a few hundred, and they're settling and they're becoming ingrained into society, which is very much what British society is about today anyway. You know, British society, we're an island nation. We're very, very cosmopolitan. We've had waves of people coming over to Britain, but we always identify us with a bog standard part of Britain that is British, right? So what I mean by that is that in the Anglo-Saxon period, in the pre-Roman period, you've got people coming over from the continent settling. You've got the native peoples of Britain. Then the Romans are coming over here. And then they've got lots of different people from the Roman world coming over here. And we've got evidence of even Chinese people settling in Britain by around AD 200. And we know that because we've got bones of Chinese workers being found in London dating to around AD 200. So we don't need to go on with that. So it's just waves of people with the core of the DNA just being added to over and over and over again. So when we go to the Anglo-Saxon period, it isn't a period that there's a mass slaughter or there's a mass annihilation of local people and everybody becomes Anglo-Saxon overnight. That doesn't happen. Most of the stories associated with King Arthur are all associated with those Britons that hang on to resist the Anglo-Saxons. And the Anglo-Saxons are usually seen to be very warlike, as we've seen with another talk that we did. They are a very brutish ruling people. So you might get an Anglo-Saxon aristocratic family moving into a village with a couple of warriors, and they basically say, now we're the ones in charge. And that's what we're talking about. So what we do see with the Anglo-Saxons is they add to our identity. They add something. But the one thing that I will say about the Anglo-Saxons, the reason why I was up in the Anglo-Saxons a lot was because of the following statement. And the statement is as follows. Roman civilization left us a lot of ruins around Britain. It left us walls of Roman forts. It left us towers. It left us excavated Roman remains. It left us Hadrian's Wall. It left us tracts of roads in Northumberland. It left us very few buildings that are actually still used today. You've got the Dover Lighthouse. You've got probably the large bit of the building that was used as a storage building at Viraconium, Wroxeter, which we had a look at the other week. You've got Ravensglass. You've got the remains of a bathhouse that was used as a shed up until recent years. And then we start to struggle to find Roman buildings that are still used today. However, there are 50 Anglo-Saxon buildings, churches, that are still used today as churches. 50 Anglo-Saxon churches built in the 8, 9, 1000s that are still actually used today as churches, which is, in my mathematics, 47 more Anglo-Saxon buildings than Roman buildings still used today. So that means that it's almost as if Anglo-Saxon buildings became very, very important into the human consciousness. And there's one key answer why that is. And the key answer, I've just got to close the door a little bit. Hang on a minute. Go on, you beautiful. I know. We got to close the door. I know. Do you want to go outside a minute? Go on outside. Go on, Go on. Yeah, there you go, Yeah. It's all okay. I couldn't make it up, could I? Right, if we look at this, there's one reason why Anglo-Saxon architecture is still within our consciousness. And the simple answer is wood. What I mean by that is that British culture loves its wood. We built a navy, and we become very powerful, felling trees, and we were able to dominate the world. U-bows allowed us to be victors at the Battle of Crecy in 1346 and the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, and then you go back in time. Stonehenge may be built out of stone, but all the architecture at Stonehenge is almost as if it was created by people who were used to working in wood. And then you get to the Iron Age, everything's more in the south, more made of wood. The Romans come over and they start building things in stone. They start to build stone basilicas. They start to build stone walls. They start to build stone bridges. They start to build stone towers like the tower at Dover. They start to build stone everything. And then Roman civilization starts to collapse. And lots of those stone buildings start to fall down and start to disintegrate. They're not maintained. The roads are not maintained. The very few lengths of stone aqueducts, they're not maintained. All the stone stuff falls down. But what then dominates is timber. And in fact, the Anglo-Saxons are a culture of people that love working in timber, like the Britons in this country. And what the Anglo-Saxons do is, as we actually see at Earl's Barton here, is that they're carving into stone as if they're carving into wood. And this is very, very clear by the way these windows are created. It's almost as if you've got a flat lintel with those two windows there. A Georgian flat lintel. It's almost as if they're trying to replicate carving into wood, but carving into stone at the same time. Those columns there for the windows, for the fenestration there, they look very reminiscent of wood. The sort of shield on the left there, which is some kind of boss placed into the wall, that looks like the person carving that was carving into wood, but obviously it's stone. And you can see the way the linear lines are with those windows. It's all reminiscent of somebody who is a wood carver. So that's what we're exactly talking about. We'll go on to this in a few moments, but let's see what else I've got in my notes. So when we think about the Anglo-Saxons, what we do see is that only one of their wooden churches actually still survives in Britain. It's in Essex. But initially, the Anglo-Saxons came over here, and they were initially working in wood. But as wood got a little bit scarce, they started carving out of stone. Or maybe they started realizing that wood wasn't as permanent as stone. So they started using their carpentry skills in working into stone instead. But in many ways, I'm discounting everything that's associated with our native British brethren. And what I mean by that is that it's very likely that lots of those that were actually involved in creating these many Anglo-Saxon churches, all 50 of them that still remain in Britain, still used today, most of that workforce would have been native British as well. So it was almost as if it was native British people and Anglo-Saxons and some Roman workers just basically getting together. We're going to create these buildings, but using carpentry skills. And nothing really changed until the Normans came over to Britain. It was all created again in a way as if you were carving into wood instead. So what we can claim is that there are believed to be up to 267 churches in Britain that have at least a little bit of Anglo-Saxon architecture still remaining in it, with the 50 that are all definitely Anglo-Saxon. And these all date to before the 1000s, so they all date before the Norman period. Now, the architectural characteristics of Anglo-Saxon church buildings, ecclesiastical buildings, have been massively influenced by everything that went before. And what we're going to do is actually have a quick look at this building in front of us. Now, this is an Anglo-Saxon arch window at a place called St. Michael's Church in Fobbing, Essex, and lots of the Anglo-Saxon churches actually are in Essex today. And something very interesting about this, and what is very interesting about this blocked up window, which I will illustrate now, this blocked up window, is that the Anglo-Saxon architect, or who the person within the Anglo-Saxon period, that's what we're talking about. It's the Anglo-Saxon period. That's what we should be saying. This window itself is made out of crudely collected surface stone, mainly all just flint nodules and some limestone and sandstone that may have been available in that landscape, brought in or and so on. And that isn't really a greatly dressed window. So what they're doing is that they're just cobbling a window together, which is now blocked up. But even though they're cobbling a window together that's now blocked up, instead of using the greatly enhanced dressed stones that they could have actually used, that window is still there today and is still used principally in a modern day place of worship. So if we move on, if we just move back again a little bit, back to this absolutely beautiful building. We've visited this building a number of times. This is Brixworth, but what we're gonna do, we're gonna bring Brixworth in a moment. So what we do find is that early Anglo-Saxon buildings in Britain were generally simple. They were constructed by timber, but as we've already said, they eventually started to build those stone buildings that are still with us today. And in many ways, the Anglo-Saxons and those Anglo-Saxons that ruled over society were trying to rebuild society in some areas, particularly in the eastern part of Britain. And one thing you can say about Brixworth that we've actually mentioned quite a number of times is that Brixworth itself, a minster church in Northamptonshire, is a church that's been which has been completed mainly out of completely recycled Roman stonework, as I remember saying 2 weeks ago. And then what you do see with the styles of this church, you actually start to see that what would then eventually become Anglo-Saxon is based on what was around for the Anglo-Saxons to look at in the first place. So Brixworth leads on to all those other Anglo-Saxon churches that we see being constructed across Britain. Now, this is a rather very interesting statement. And I'm going to mention this. Do you know, I mentioned a few moments ago about the about our traditional building material and our traditional building style being out of timber. This next statement will really help with that. But before we go with that, I've actually got quite advanced with my carpentry skills. Carpentry runs in the family anyway, and with the land that we've got in West Wales, I remember I'm building a toilet block in West Wales, and I put this really chunky doorway up. So I put the doorway up, and then we're going to build the rest of the building. I put the ground floor level of the building in and some of the sides, and then I put the doorway in, and I put this really massive chunky lintel on the top. And I've just thought that looks actually like one of the trilithon stones in Stonehenge, right? Where you've got these two upright stones and you've got a lintel on the top. And I just thought, wow. And then the realization is again what Stonehenge is based upon, the idea of principally working in timber. And it's natural for people to work in timber, isn't it, Mike? It's straightforward. You're just about to yawn.
Easy, yeah.
It's easy. It's easy. But when you start using timber, you can do anything, right? But that may sound simple, folks, but it's not, because there are cultures on the planet that only use stone because that's all they've got. The Inca, everything's in stone because they used the building in stone. Yeah?
Stonehenge started in wood.
Yeah, Stonehenge would have started in wood. But what I'm trying to say, right, is Stonehenge was created by people who are used to carpentry. Yeah? because you've got the tongue and groove joints with the main stones that create the circle, where you've got the tongue and groove that they slot in, and you've got the trilithon stones, where you've got the mortise and tenon joint, where you've got a little dimple and they put a stone on top. All evidence that they're really into their carpentry. So what we're saying is that we've got this tradition of working in wood. And there's a bit of a red herring that we'll mention in a while. We've got this tradition about working in wood. The Romans bloody come along. Mike, you can't stand the Romans, can you? The Romans come along and they ruin everything. They start building in stone. And this is that statement. The stone buildings imposed on England by the Romans would have been startling and exceptional. And following the collapse of Roman society in the years of the 400s, there was a widespread return to timber buildings. That sounds mad. A cultural shift that is not possible to explain by recourse to technological determinism. So what we're saying, Mike, right, this is what we're saying, right? There's 2 points here, right? I can't be bothered with you two guys there. Here we go, discussion, right? What we've got is that, let's get them on the screen, Mike. I've lost them, where are they? You can still see me, guys, right? So what we're talking about, I've always thought it was mad that you've got all these Roman cities, you've got all these walls, and then the people that were living in those cities, when things start to collapse in about 420, 430 in Roman Britain, right? They go into the countryside, right? Archaeologists can't work that out. And then the Anglo-Saxon peoples and the Franks and the Jutes, other people come over from Germany. Some people come over from Ireland and Scandinavia, they all come over here, right? And everyone's building in timber, right? And it's always thought by archaeologists to be a step back in time, right? It's always seen to be going back into time and things go basic again, right? But I've stayed in a timber roundhouse, right? It's brilliant, right? I've stayed in a timber roundhouse where you've got electricity, you've got a toilet, you've got running water, and you've actually got a fireplace, a proper fireplace, right, with a little door on it and everything, right? However, what archaeologists find is no evidence. They excavate these buildings because all the timber's rotted away. So they think that people lived a basic lifestyle. And I tell you what, I'd far prefer to live in a timber building than a stone building. You know this, don't you? A timber building's warmer than a stone building. Stone buildings are hell to heat up, right? And the other thing as well is, if we stop there a minute, the other thing as well is if we go to the likes of Scotland, this is a red herring now. We'll go to the likes of Scotland. What we do see is we see people are building in timber structures in the Iron Age going all the way north, right? They're still, Northumberland, they're still building timber in the Iron Age, Anglo-Saxon period timber, right? Forget the Romans, right? That's the interlude. That's the exception. But if you start to go really further up north in Scotland, the likes of the tip of Scotland, and you've got John O'Groats, and then you go to Orkney and you go to Shetland, and some of the Hebridean islands, everybody's building in stone. And the reason why they're building in stone, Mike, is the same reason as the Inca are building in stone. They haven't got anything else to build in. And the one thing that we do see is that the stone structures that are built at the same time as all those timber structures in the south are really small, they're really cold, very difficult to keep dry inside, right? Walls are massively thick, right? Everything's over cumbersome. So in other words, you'd be far better off building in timber. So that's the mindset. We should be building in timber and not stone. You guys can disagree, but we live in modern day cities. The reason why in Europe, in this part of Europe, we build in stone because of fire risks. We build in brick and stone. It's the tradition now, right? But you go to Scandinavia, everything's in wood. So you can see what I'm saying. And I've just said something else there as well. Scandinavia, Europe, Hungary, Poland, Bulgaria, it's all wood, right? Denmark, it's all wood, yeah. Mind you, go to Copenhagen, there's a lot of brick and stone, isn't there? But the fact of the matter is, those people were the same people coming over to Britain, right? And they were coming across people in Britain who were used to building in timber anyway. So what we do, we move the Romans out, and then if the Romans never came to Britain, we would be living in timber buildings today in Britain. What influenced us and changed what we did and our identity and mucked it up a little bit was that period that we've sometimes struggled to get away from with the Romans after the Iron Age and before this Anglo-Saxon period of change and influence. We might, again, I'm going to repeat this again, we might call it the Anglo-Saxon period, but most of the people in Britain at that time are actually native Britons, except for the people on the Isle of Wight who were just odd. Could also people be moving across land more so wood fitted better? Yeah. So a stone structure is over cumbersome. You can't move a stone structure, and I think I know your point. It's far easier to abandon a wooden structure and to burn it down and to move somewhere else than it is to sort of leave a stone structure and be connected to it. If that's the case, then we'll go with that. So I can see that in the notes. So anyway, so this is the thing, you see, this is the point that even though we believe that we should have technically continued building in stone after the Roman period, we just thought we can't be asked. Stone buildings are hell to maintain, right? Stone buildings are so difficult to maintain, where timber buildings ain't. You have something going wrong with the timber building, you can either burn it down and rebuild, or you can just repair it with another piece of timber. With a stone building, if stone building collapses, what a hell of a lot of crap you've got to deal with. Timber structures are very important, but then we go back to the stone buildings, the Anglo-Saxon stone buildings that still survive. In the mindsets of the Anglo-Saxons and this new culture that was developing in Britain that was used to working in timber, they just took the stone and they said, right, we'll work this stone as if it's timber. That's what we're talking about. So the stone actually embodies the timber structures around because they look like timber anyway. And Mike, Stonehenge, the stones of Stonehenge are meant to look like timber anyway. It's just that it's stone wood. It's stone. But you can see that, can't you? Stone timber. So Anglo-Saxon building forms were very much part of the general building tradition. So generally building in timber, and then obviously timber to stone, because the stone is replicating the timber. It's the natural building medium of the age. The very Anglo-Saxon word for building is timber. So you build to build in timber. So what we then say is this sort of deeply embedded Germanic identity, that what we do see is being something that very much goes into our mindset. And the other thing as well is when the Anglo-Saxons were building, when the Anglo-Saxons were building, eventually they're building their timber structures into stone and brick. Instead of having big fat churches, right, made out of stone, they're having narrow churches like this one. They're having narrow churches. So what they're doing, they're taking the timber way of building in long, narrow halls, but they're just building them in stone and timber. So in other words, even though the Anglo-Saxons and the Anglo-Saxon period, they've got access to thinking in stone, they don't think in stone. They still think in timber. This is the point. And what we do find is that it's just a transference of how they're doing things and moving things on a stage further. So right, let's move on a little bit. Again, what we can see is that in one or two church porches, and we've got three, we actually do see the point here is that you've got Anglo-Saxon churches, right? The Normans come along, they demolish the stone Anglo-Saxon churches, right? So they pile up all the Anglo-Saxon masonry somewhere in the church corner, and in comes the 1500s. They need stone to actually be used in the construction of porches, because churches, as I keep saying, you usually get a nave or a chancel first, and then a nave or a chancel is added on. So that's usually about the 1200s, and a tower is added by about the 1400s. And by about the late 1600s, they start building porches. So any stone that's around, they use to construct these porches. Now, the one thing that I've already mentioned is about the reuse of the reuse of Roman building material to create Anglo-Saxon churches, right? But this image has got something else. This is at Pritwell Parish Church, Southend-on-Sea. If no one knows where Southend-on-Sea is, it's in Essex again. So we've got another example of a church in Essex. But this is a really interesting one, because this is like a bit of everything, really. And why is it a bit of everything? Well, first of all, what we do see is that in the Anglo-Saxon period, at Pritwell, they're actually reusing Roman material to create this arch. Yeah. So later on, what's happening is that they alter the church. Right, they have some major changes to the church, and whatever the Anglo-Saxon stuff remains, this side has been removed. But something else is going on. In a future generation, probably by about the 1400s, they find all the earlier Anglo-Saxon stuff, and they use it in the construction of the church nave wall. And you can actually see dressed stone. You can actually see the carvings on these dressed stones. Let's just sort of move out a bit. Let's just sort of really move out and actually show you that. The reuse of Anglo-Saxon material at Prittlewell Church in Southend. And you can actually clearly see that there are dressed stones, which are here. That's a really nice piece of dressed stone. And really interestingly enough, this is reused Roman material, the remaining Anglo-Saxon arch. This part of the church is demolished, the Anglo-Saxon church. Then later on, 1500s, they start to add bits of Anglo-Saxon stuff that are lying around, and also the occasional bit of Roman brick. So the reuse of Anglo-Saxon material. And that's the thing. This is the thing. Anglo-Saxon material is quite decorative, it's quite durable, it's reusable over and over again, like lots of the Roman stuff. But that there is an embodiment of everything that we're saying. Reuse of Roman, reuse of Anglo-Saxon, Anglo-Saxon stuff surviving. Bob's your uncle. There it is. So let's go back and I just want to tell you a couple of other things as well. So what we do find is that we're talking about this this Anglo-Saxon thing a lot, and we're talking about the Anglo-Saxon period. And what we do see is something really interesting, right? Now, this type of I'm going to draw a little bit of a map up here. So let's get my little bit of a map up. There's another little point to be made here. So let's get down on there. My board, my drawing board. So what we do see, if we put a line down there, and what we do find, we see, if I write in, we write west. We do west of Britain. So the west of Britain is, for example, Cumbria, Cymru, Wales, and we've got Cornwall, which I would call the three seas. Now, those three seas are very different regions in about the period that we're sort of talking about, when things really start to get going in regards to the Anglo-Saxon age by around 600 years AD, with the likes of Bede's and St. Augustine coming over here in 597, right? So by about 600 years AD, this is when the idea of the Anglo-Saxon period is really starting to take hold. So what we've got on this side, what we've got on the Anglo-Saxon side is that what we do find is the east of Britain, east and north, and the south. What we do find is that we've got a lot of stone churches, yeah, and that's very much to do with Christianity is on the eastern side of Britain very different than on the western side of Britain, yeah. So have we got many stone churches on the western side of Britain, surviving from around the 600-700s? The answer is very few to none. And the reason why that is quite simple, is that people ruling over the landscape on the eastern side of Britain, you know, Essex, Northumberland, Kent, Isle of Wight, right? Those people themselves have sold themselves out to this Anglo-Saxon ethic. There's more people ruling over this area who are Anglo-Saxon than are on the western side of Britain, right? So what we see on the western side of Britain is actually something very different, because the western side of Britain, I can tell you on a P, don't you, Mike? Yeah. All right then. I'm going to put a kettle on soon as well. On the western side of Britain, what usually survives is stone crosses. We got a few stone crosses in Cumbria. We got loads of stone crosses in Cymru, Wales, and we've got stone crosses by the bucket load in Cornwall. Right? There's all these stone sort of roadside crosses. There's all this association with Christianity. And what that tells us is that Christianity was very different in the western side of Britain than it is in the eastern side of Britain. The eastern side of Britain, they've got to build these stone churches, and the western side of Britain, we just put crosses up. We don't need in the western side of Britain to see Christianity as more than just a religion. On the eastern side of Britain, it's more of a way of life. It's more of a cultural sense of control. On the eastern side of Britain, this is the other thing. On the eastern side of Britain, we've got the Christianity of I've already mentioned it. We've got the Christianity of Saint Germanus, who comes over here in 446, I think it is. We've got Saint Augustine, who comes over here in 597. And that is the Christianity of the Church of Rome. And that Christianity lasts all the way up until the time of the Normans, who changed Christianity again. But on this side here, I want to write this in blue. On this side, what we do find is on the western side of Britain, it's the Church of the Romans. And that is really important, because it's the Church of the Romans that was left behind, the legacy of Rome, just as Roman civilization was collapsing in Britain in the late 300s and the 400s. It was a very different Christianity than the Church of Rome that came over later. And it's got to be very, very careful with that. So, and what's this got to do with architecture? This sort of stone building, but using carpentry skills on the eastern side is very powerful. On the western side, if you're going to have a stone cross, it's a stone cross. That's what it is. There's no airs and graces. It's a stone cross. So hopefully that's been of some help there now. So I have been gassing for a whole hour, right? So we will come back to this after the break. There's a little bit more to go, right? So are there any questions for me, Mike? Like, why did I throw the turkey out? Because he was not happy with me talking about the Romans, so he got upset. Goff, anything? Goff, you've managed to stay with us, which is good. So, Goff, anything you'd like to say?
No, it's quite interesting. Waiting for the next bit.
Is sex and sex with you? Waiting for the next bit. I can't believe it. Yeah. What about you, Henry?
Well, I've learned something because I couldn't work out why there were so many stone crosses around the villages in the Vale of Glamorgan.
Because
so I now understand why.
It's their expression of Christianity. It's very different from this is the point. If you go over to England, right, you might find the odd stone cross, but you don't see an obsession of them, right? Cornwall, Wales, and a little bit of Cumbria, they're obsessed with these stone crosses. It's the type of thing that you've got to erect on a Wednesday afternoon, that type of thing.
Right, I'll bear that in mind.
You know, so it's something to do. If you're a bit bored, right? Stick up a cross. So on that note, but obviously Jane's not going to join us today, so we'll take a little break and we'll be back in a short while.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't let the bed.
See you then.
See you then. If you leave me now,
Leaving.
you take away the greatest part of me. Oh. Right, Mike. So what was I going to say? Do you know what I was going to say, Mike? Because I don't. Right, do you want a cup of coffee, Mike? Tea? Tea.
Coffee, thanks.
All right, then. Well, Michelle's not here today to make it, so. Right, okay. I'm just checking something, Mike. Right. I'll be with you now. Right. So what have you been doing this week, Mike?
I don't know, I went down to the island last week.
You went down where?
Last week.
Oh, did you?
Last week.
Yeah, go on. Oh, did you stay with your daughter or something?
Yeah.
All right. When did you go down?
I don't know.
All right. Saturday.
What's that you built in out there then?
Oh, it's the goat shed.
How is it?
Yeah. That's my goat shed. So yeah.
What's that where it's going to be?
Not the goat shed, Mike. Sorry, you caught me up with the Isle of Wight. No, that's the turkey shed.
Oh, right.
It's for turkeys. Mike, tell me about the Isle of Wight, Mike. How did that go?
Oh yeah, good. That's all.
Oh, hang on. Is this the one that you saw like this woman that you're interested in who's 70?
Oh, my sister-in-law.
Ah, right. Yeah, you did mention that to me. I've obviously. When did you go down?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I've seen. I saw you on Thursday. You told me all about it.
I must have been earlier then. Last weekend, the weekend before, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I have seen you. Yeah, you told me about it.
And my son-in-law left the electrical car.
Well, you went out in that.
Yeah. I drove to the steers through the headlights. The steers itself actually through the headlights.
Does it?
Yeah.
So it's an electric. Oh right. So right.
From electric.
What makes that?
Audi.
That kind of being cheap.
Yeah, probably 30,000.
Yeah, I think they're about 25 grand, Mike. Now they're not cheap.
Nothing to go out. Son-in-law.
Yeah.
He was going to give that to his daughter. No, his wife.
Yeah.
And buy another one.
Christ. Well, they're gonna have two.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
For my daughter. My daughter.
Oh wow. That's cool, Mike. They buy you one next.
Yeah. Quite impressive.
Not as bad as this. Coffee, is it? Does she have done anything with it? Just been too wet and stuff. So in the dark. Something the plastic top. No, it's not. It was. It's not. I'll bring the milk through now. Bring the milk through. Right. Biscuits there. Biscuits there. Biscuits there. Yeah, you have to get some out for me. Don't stand like that, Mike. They'll think you're a teapot. So what time you got to go today, Mike?
Oh, anytime.
It's going to that fast?
Yeah.
Good. Oh, you're going to have to go off. There's some biscuits there for you, Mike. Just gonna speak to Jessica.
He's in a shit, isn't he, Andrew?
Fucking hell, shit. Christ. The thing is, because he's so famous, he can't disappear.
No,
There's no possible way he can get out of it.
no.
Mind you, he's got to be fucking stupid for getting involved in that anyway. Oh, God.
Well, they thought he was untouchable, didn't they?
I don't know. Do you think he's guilty?
Yeah.
Yeah, but oh, I know. Can they imprison a member of the royal family?
Well, I don't think he could go to prison for it. He was 17. I'm in 16, see, isn't it?
No, what I mean is when was the last time somebody went to prison in the royal family?
Oh, I don't know. Charles the First on the Isle of Wight.
That's true. Can they imprison? Prison. He came straight up. A member of royal family. Well, the Queen's above the law anyway. But can a member of the royal family go to jail? Hang on a minute, Mike. There's an answer. The Queen. Right. Okay. Her Majesty 93 is actually immune from civil and criminal proceedings.
She's just waving to Andrew.
But the same can't be said. No! The same can't be said for the rest of the royal family. On the royal household website, it says, in the earliest times, the sovereign was a key figure in the enforcement of laws. Oh, man. Well, no longer administrator. Okay. So she can't be. She can't prosecute herself. In other words, right? That's fair enough. Right. While the Queen has sovereign immunity, the likes of Kate Middleton, Prince William, and Prince Charles still need to watch their actions. And so does Prince Andrew. All eyes have recently been on Prince Andrew over his connection to Epstein. The Duke has been urged to put himself forward to be quizzed by US investigators. Oh, there is no suggestion that he has committed anything wrong. So it is understood Andrew is not eligible for sovereign immunity, as only the Queen is entitled to that category of protection. So in other words, he's fucked. Fucking hell.
No, they really fucking go for him.
Andrew was sacked by the... He was sacked?
He was sacked by them.
What the name by the fucking Queen?
Oh, she had in there.
She sacked him.
He's being prosecuted in America anyway.
Hang on a minute, I didn't think you could hear this conversation.
Yeah, they're all you swearing.
Oh, God. I thought I'd put myself on mute. So what do you reckon's going to happen, Goff?
Well, it's in America, isn't it? It's not in the UK. He's not being prosecuted for anything in the UK. It's what he did in America. And she's taken a private civil suit against him. The girl.
Shouldn't she? Yeah, go on.
But the authorities in New York want to speak to him about Epstein, and there's no suggestion that he's going to be into trouble.
So
I think he's an arsehole, but I think he's horrible.
There's not many people who don't think they're assholes.
Pardon?
Oh, hang on, I got Jess on the phone now. She wants to...
Don't swear.
Yeah, Jess, how's it going? Harry, I've been told off by everyone that I'm swearing too much. Because I'm swearing too much. Well, no, I kept the mic on in the break, didn't I? So Deb, tell me, how's it going today? So, no Jane then, because she was meant to. So there's no Andrea?
No Andrea, no.
So there's Kathy there?
Yeah.
Is there Algernon?
Yeah.
And what about the other Chris? Oh, right, excellent. So 3, 4.
I don't keep Jim on there.
Yeah, that's right. You're better off without Jim.
I don't know where Andrea is. She didn't turn up last week either.
I think she's away somewhere.
Oh, right, okay, that's fine, that's fine. As long as she hasn't disappeared from this year.
No, she hasn't. She'll be back. So anyone want to ask me anything before we get started again?
No,
Okay, so you know what we're doing next week, yeah? The battlefields of the American Civil War?
yeah, we've written that down.
Okay, then. Okay, good.
It'll not be an interesting one. Or you can come out with your hat and check the car as well.
Exactly.
You'll find that the archaeologist that is one-sided.
Yeah, don't worry, it won't be one-sided when I'm doing it, because being that I've always been a Confederate convert, and I do not believe the American Civil War was about slavery, but that's calling me a racist then, isn't it? So.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get scared of things like that to do, and that's why they don't look at both sides. They get scared of doing that.
Exactly. So
And the same type of stuff that start maybe not going down the racist route, but maybe that's where we forced on them.
yeah, exactly. And it goes back to what I've always said. If I was a frontline soldier fighting for the Confederacy, I would not be fighting to keep slavery going. I've got to be honest with you.
No, exactly. And a lot of people on the Confederate side were either black or white, I think as well.
Yeah, there were. There's quite a lot of them.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Bedford. Exactly. General Bedford Forrest. Most of his army was actually black, and he was a Confederate general.
Oh, that's really good. That's really interesting. Yeah, I don't think that helps. I'm a good digging myself.
Cool. We'll come up with something good. So.
Yeah, I think there was one battlefield, I can't remember where it is, I sent it over to you, where they'd found it was like a nail in a glass jar, and they felt that it was from the Confederate side, and they felt like the victims were sort of bringing magic into medicine and almost like a charm to keep them safe.
Or to ward off the evil of the Union. Exactly. So, oh no, that nail in a jar. That sounds good. And so one last thing I was going to ask before I get started. We're talking about Epstein and Prince Andrew. Did you manage to get those leaflets out?
Yeah, I got some out.
All right, then that's good. Okay.
I've got a small handful left over as well, some more next week. I'll just keep doing them every week until they're over and finished with.
Brilliant. Oh, okay, great. Well, give my love to everyone.
I will, Carl.
Oh, remind Kathy that we need some more shekels for Chester.
Oh, right, yeah, I will.
Best of luck.
I will, Carl. I will.
And anything you want to ask me before I get going?
No, everything's perfect. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Give me a ring later.
I will, Carl. Take care.
Doing a great job. Speak to you then.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
What's on at Chester then?
Oh, we got an excursion to Chester in October, Mike.
I'm not coming then.
Well, you could do, Mike. You could stay with a driver in the shared room. You'd be picked up. I don't know. You'd be picked up somewhere around here anyway.
Who's the driver then?
Filthy Chris.
Who?
Filthy Chris. Oh, it's Chris. So, ask me about it next week, Mike.
Yeah.
What was I going to say, Mike? What were we talking about? So the question is, right?
Yeah.
what happens to Prince Andrew if he is convicted of anything and he's got to go to prison?
Well, he won't, will he? He's in America.
Yeah, but the Queen.
He's nothing in America, isn't he? He's nothing. He's got no immunity in America. Just only in this country where the Queen can't be prosecuted.
He won't be going to America for a while.
No. Well, to put it this way, right, Garth, I think you better stop telling people he's your best mate.
Anyway, he won't. Nothing will happen to him because it'll all be covered up, and you know.
Fair enough.
That's what happens.
Mind you, it's a way of getting rid of him.
Well,
you never hear from Prince Edward, do you, at all? Is he still alive?
I've met Prince Edward.
Is he still alive, though?
Yes, I met him in Bristol in the Real Golf Club at a bum fight.
Yeah, but let's move on. Right, anyway, let's carry on, folks.
Nice, he's a nice bloke. He said, "Hello, Goff. Lovely day, isn't it?"
Hello, Goff. Like, how's it doing? Like,
How you doing, mate? All right.
How you doing, mate? Yeah, right, mate.
Yeah. The band, yeah.
Yeah. Can you buy me a drink, like, mate? And you bought him a drink.
You Scots bastards come down here. Piss about a square.
Yeah, exactly. Right, okay.
Prince Andrew will be, nothing will happen to him. I mean, look what they used to do in the 19th century, the royal family. My God.
Go on.
Yeah. No, they're up to all sorts of nastiness and.
Oh no! Come on, you're not being very nice about the royal family. I've got to be honest with you.
Well, they're not very nice, are they? They're like most people.
Right, okay, folks. Let's get back on. Let's prescribe ourselves. Right, okay. Let's get back straight onto it. And right, okay. Are you there, Henri? Henri Brevin.
Yes.
I wish you spelt your name right. It begins with a H, not an E. Right, so this next image is, I was fascinated by this next image, right? I don't know if you've seen this in the news, but this came out a couple of days ago. This is actually, all the lower section is actually, and you can tell that from the stonework, this is actually a stretch of Hadrian's Wall that's actually been found through the streets of, there it is, Newcastle. Now, I think this is intriguing, right? And the reason why I think this is intriguing is, one, that it's actually survived. The Roman War has actually survived in Newcastle, and the people actually putting the electrical mains or whatever through there had no legal obligation to actually protect that Roman wall at all. So I think it's going to be interesting that they just put the pipe work a bit further over, and the Roman wall is going to be protected. So as a well done to the developer actually putting the utilities in, they've actually made this public, and we've got a nice little bit of a stretch of Hadrian's Wall going through the middle of Newcastle. And there's another little bit more of it. So I think they've got a couple of sections, and the wall that you're seeing there is obviously Hadrian's Wall proper, and that's what we're seeing. So that's the base of that. So anyway, back to what we were talking about. Next, we're going to look at this locality, right? And then we're going to, there it is, St. Mary's Church at Ringsworth. And what I'd like to do, I'd like to leave this as a little bit of a backdrop. And I'm gonna get my little bits of notes up here. And right now, what we were talking about, if I can really get back into this, which is not going to be easy. What we were talking about was the differences in where you find the stone crosses in the west of Britain, and you've got the churches in the east of Britain, and it's this idea of working in this sort of genre of timber when in fact you're actually working in stone. So one of the things that I will say is the way that the Anglo-Saxons, or this period of the Anglo-Saxons, in the way they're trying to build out of stone, but using carpentry tools, but at the end of the day, emulate things that had gone before. Now, this next image is rather interesting, so I'm going to have to get this up on my screen. So, this image here. Now, this is rather interesting. Mike, do you know where this is? Reculver, St. Mary's, Kent? Never been there? Right, Reculver is a Roman location of a Roman fort in Kent, and there's a church that is, a bit of it's now eroded into the sea. It's always been eroded into the sea, so the Roman fort was very close to the sea. Now there were remains of a triple arch opening separating the nave and the apse inside the church of St. Mary's, dated back to the 600s. This is rather interesting, very similar to something that we've already said has been demonstrated in an earlier image. And what we have is, it's almost as if they're reusing, hang on a minute, I've lost, my image has disappeared a second. It's almost as if they're reusing Roman brick and Roman stone from the fort. Roman brick, Roman stone, Roman brick, Roman stone. This again, an Anglo-Saxon period building. And they've gone even further. Instead of having, in the Roman style, having one arch that might go over something like that, what they've done, they've thought, right, what we want to do is replicate something that's gone before. So we'll build a really tall column, arrow stone, and then what we'll do, we'll have these 3 Romanesque arches, which is typical in the genre of the Anglo-Saxon period. But what they're doing, they're replicating earlier ways of building, but again, building in stone, as we can actually clearly see in front of us now. So if we go back to the earlier image, which is this one, this is the reuse of Anglo-Saxon material at Ringsworth Church in Derbyshire. Right, so I'm just going to get my notes back on the screen so I know where we're going again. And if I move back up there, okay, right. So what we're looking at is that we've got the Roman and the British populations of Wales and the West Country and Cumbria experience a sense of autonomy from Anglo-Saxon influence. And even when people talk about the Anglo-Saxon period in Wales, there's very little evidence. And there's more sense of the Vikings in Wales than there is of a sense of Anglo-Saxon influence in Wales. And we'll talk about that in a very short while. What we also see is not only those crosses that we actually see in the 3 Cs, Cumbria, Cymru, and Cornwall. We also see something else that is very sort of Iron Age, but is New Christian, holy wells. You get lots of holy wells in Cornwall. You get lots of holy wells in Cymru, Wales as well. And this is more characteristic of what's going on with the Roman Church, the legacy of the Roman Church, rather than the new legacy of the Anglo-Saxon Church that's actually taken over in England. Now, a thing I need to say is this thing about Christianity, right? Christianity on the western part of Britain was forced upon people. Surprise with that, Mike. Christianity was forced upon people in Roman Britain, yeah. And in many ways, the last bits of Roman Britain survived in the likes of Cornwall, Cymru, and Cumbria. Yeah. On the eastern side of Britain, things were starting to fall apart massively. You've got the sense of King Arthur. You've got the idea of, you've got these new waves of people coming over, whoever they were, the Jutes, the Angles, the Saxons, the Germanic peoples, even the odd Goths coming over as well. You've got all these different people and people from Scandinavia coming over, right? And what they could see in England was a bit of a vacuum. People were turning back to paganism. And it worked quite well because the Angles and the Saxons were pagan. And very strangely, this is a very strange thing. When St. Augustine came over in 597, there was a massive conversion of everyone in the eastern part of England. You know, everyone was converting to this new Christianity. And that's very odd because it's almost as if they went to it naturally. It suited their needs. But actually, folks, it's the other way around. Christianity managed to get entrenched quite rapidly in the eastern part of Britain, and these people using these carpentry skills and wanted to build new churches and to impress the new faith. Because what Christianity did was they were to invade people's mindsets and say, well, if you're doing that, if you tweak it a little another way, it's classed as Christian, right? And if you build the building this way, then it's classed as Christian. So they were able to convert people quite easily. And this is very similar in regards to what was happening in Scotland as well with the Picts, because the Picts almost edged towards Christianity quite quickly. So within a very short period of time, up until about the 800s, most of Britain had actually converted to Christianity. Now, I just wanted to show you this one site. And if I've got the Wikipedia entry up here, so we'll chuck this in here quickly. This is that site in Essex that is actually a wooden Anglo-Saxon church. This is a place called Greenstead Church in Essex, and this is rather interesting, Mike. And the reason why this is rather interesting is it's back to everything that I've already said. You've got a church that was probably built in the 600s-700s out of timber, Mike, right? Yeah. But what can you see down below? Brick.
They would have put that in
later.
The timber would have been rotted out.
But Mike, that's all right. So you get 3 out of 3 for that, right? But you're not thinking outside the box. And the reason why I didn't, it's not being fair. What I wanted to say was that at Greenstead Church, the wooden church at Greenstead, in say the 1100s, they thought this is a really special church. It's an old church. We respect this church. It's already 500 years old. So probably a little bit later on, actually, more towards about the Tudor period, they started thinking, we need to preserve this church, right? So they decided, as you've said, to either move the church from one location to the next and put this template underneath it, or simply almost aquaprop the thing up and to like replace the wooden foundations with a brick sill, which we've already said. Now, that's obvious, right? But what isn't obvious is why they didn't just set light to the church. They could just set light to the church and they could have actually built a new church. And I think the point is that the people in the area respected this church so much, they wanted to keep it going. And it's made out of timber, and it's made by a people that are very similar to us in history. And it goes back to that original tradition about Stonehenge. It's like timber, and it's the way we've always done things. We love wood in Britain. This is what we said. It's a wooden church. We love wood in Britain. It's got all this stone stuff and brick stuff going on, but it's wood. And do you know what they used to say, Mike? Can you you can't remember back to the First World War because we weren't born. But I can remember that in school it was that thing that the royal families in Europe were all interlinked. The Kaiser and the House of Windsors and the Habsburgs, it was all interlinked, and the Tsar of Russia and so on. And because, and you think back to what I've just said, the Britons saw themselves so linked to the Germans that they didn't think there was going to be a war in the First World War between the Germans and the British, because we were so similar in mindset. And actually, Adolf Hitler thought the same thing. He thought, you know, the people of Britain are so close to the Germanic people. Why are we going to have a war between each other? It was a misjudgment of Adolf Hitler in the Second World War. But this is what I've been saying from when we started this today. Everything's linked to this. The thing that binds us across Europe is timber. It's what we've got different that separates us from people in South America and people in Australia and in other parts of the world. It's timber, not skin color. It's timber. It's something that we did which was very different, right? And this is why we're so similar to the Scandinavian and Germanic people, because whether you're working in stone or wood, you're still thinking about timber. This is the point. This is the very, very point. So the next thing I want to do is I've got I would like to look at something to do with architectural styles, right? And then what we're going to do, so I'm going to get this up here in a minute. Hang on, where's my stuff? Architectural styles, and then we're going to look at those individual churches, those two that I've mentioned, and we'll call it a day, because Mike's got to get back to his faggot and chips. When was the last time we had faggot and chips? Do you know they can do vegetarian faggots now, and they're gorgeous?
I had faggot and chips a week or so ago.
Oh, that sounds gorgeous. Brains faggots. You can't, Mike, you don't have faggots unless they're brains faggots. End of story. Right, so somebody called me a faggot in school once, and I still don't know what they meant. So anyway, we'll go back to these other churches in a moment. What I want us to do
later.
Will you? All right. I can never work that out. Michelle called me a faggot as well the other day. I'm still trying to work that one out. Right. Okay. So the image that you've got in front of us, is it not some coin stones going down a building, and either side you've got some flint nodules? Is that what you're seeing, Henry?
Yes.
Quickly, we're going to identify some Anglo-Saxon stuff, and then you know what you're looking at. There are many churches that we know of. We've mentioned that there are 267 churches in Britain that have Anglo-Saxon features, and we've got 50 that are definitely Anglo-Saxon, right? So architectural historians used to say that actually, do you know what, Mike? That Anglo-Saxon stuff isn't Anglo-Saxon, it's Norman, because there's no way it could be that old. There's no way. So what they've started doing over the past 60 to 70 years, we now know that it is Anglo-Saxon in England. They dated it. And the Greenstead Church is all Anglo-Saxon. It survived. The Roman stuff hasn't, right? Because the people didn't connect with the Romans. Yeah. So what we got is interesting enough is if we look at this image. We have long and short. So basically we have coins that are actually lengthways. You've got coins that are actually vertical, length. So in other words, this is, instead of usual building, Mike, as you know, right, the coins themselves would actually be, if we want to draw this in here a little bit, we'll go with that one there. But then this next one should very much be like this, but it's not.
Oh,
Yeah.
Going on the right.
Yeah,
going
exactly. So that's the usual way of building, the one they're marked in red. But the Anglo-Saxons did it a different way, right? And I can actually see that on a carpentry level, right? I can't really explain it, but I was building something recently, and I had to use this technique, timber-wise. But being that I've actually worked on a building site as well, I wouldn't build like this. So this is alien to me. This is like an Anglo-Saxon. But if you're thinking in timber, that actually makes sense, right? I can't really explain what I'm saying with that, but that would make more sense if I could show you what I was building. Now, this next one, right? This next one is very much Anglo-Saxon, right? So what we've got, I'll zoom in on this here. So what we've got a little bit of a window that's been sort of semi-blocked up there. It would be go down a bit further. But that's what we're looking at, right? And clearly, if we scrub that a minute, I just want to clear that. So clearly, if we go like this, Mike, if you were to squint your eyes, does that look like somebody's building out of stone or timber? Just be honest with me.
I would think it was someone building in stone that wasn't a stonemason.
Actually, 100%. Somebody building in stone that wasn't a stonemason. That's probably the answer I wanted. I actually thought you were going to go one way or the other, right? That's fine. That's actually what I wanted. So somebody building in stone, but it's not a stonemason. So that is typical Anglo-Saxon. You don't build windows like this in stone. You don't do it. And the other thing that you can clearly see is the width of the church. You can see it's tall and tapering, but it's not fat. Fat is Norman. Fat is Roman, right? Because you're building in stone, you can get the spaniels. You can't really do that type of work thinking as a carpenter, because as you know in carpentry, the wider the beams, the more sense of that you're going to have droppage. You're going to have the beams in the center drooping. So if you've got it narrower, this is what the effect's going to be.
And sagging.
You're not going to have
Draws the walls in.
sagging draws the walls in if it's really wide. Yes, that's what I was looking for. Thanks, Mike. That is exactly what I was looking for, right? You should do this more often, Mike, like every week. So what we've also said is that we've got two other features, and I'm going to mention that if I may go back to the obvious ones, right? We're gonna go back a minute, right? It's called a narthex. Right. So what we usually find is we usually have what's called a narthex, which is, hang on, if I can double check my my interpretation of this, yeah, a western porch. So instead of having, instead of having the porch, which is always on the south or north of the church, you have a porch on the west end, right? So you have like this porch area on the west end, which is where the tower is, right? Which is an Anglo-Saxon feature, but you can see that on other churches, right? I've been to lots of churches where you actually enter through the tower where the porch would be, right? So that's not a massive Anglo-Saxon feature, but it could be interpreted as that. But the two things I want to mention, right, before we go on to the other two. Obviously, the obvious thing that there's reuse of material, brick. The Anglo-Saxons loved using Roman brick because it was perfect to build from, right? And also with somebody who's actually building timber buildings in timber, right? I'm using scraps. So you've got stone hanging around, brick hanging around. Yeah, that's what you do. Mike, does my little turkey shed look good from what you can see?
Yes.
Mike's impressed, you see? But simply because wood's in my system. It comes second nature. And that's all made with scraps. So the other thing I want to show us before we actually go on to the final bit, and let's just look at the end. Where is it? Right. This is very interesting. I kept this to the last. Herringbone stonework.
Our screen's not changing.
Oh, hang on a minute. Did you see Brinksworth then?
No.
What image are you looking at now?
The diagnostic features.
There?
There now.
Right,
Yeah.
good. So you've seen, just make sure that we've seen this. There's our Brinksworth. The porch would be in the West End. Got it. And then we go further forward, and we've got we've seen this, yeah. Where you've got the vertical and the horizontal building, Henry, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
They haven't shown that before.
Oh, right. That's. Oh, I haven't shown that before.
No, I don't think so. No.
Oh no, we could see it on our screen, but not theirs, right? What I was talking about the coin building as well. I was talking about this would be the typical way of building, right? Yeah. But when the Anglo-Saxons are building, as I've said, the Anglo-Saxons are building horizontally and they're building vertically. I thought you saw the image earlier on, but never mind. You have now. And then that thing about, obviously you haven't seen that either. Yeah. So that's what I was talking about. How that looks,
Okay.
where this is building in a this is somebody building out of stone, but as a carpenter.
Yeah, right.
I wish somebody had said something, but we're up to date now. And then herringbone.
Yeah.
Now, herringbone. Now, I always hear this. Yeah, I can close my notes down there, right? I always hear this, that the sure sign that you've got an Anglo-Saxon church is because you've got herringbone. And you know what I'm going to say? That's not exactly true. Lots of Anglo-Saxon churches do have this herringbone style, right? And that goes back there, and that goes back there. Fair enough. But if you didn't notice when we did the when we've done the Roman stuff, when you take away the outside skin of the Roman stone walls, for example, at the Roman site at Caerwent, the walls, beneath the hewn stone, you've got this herringbone style, right? So the herringbone style of building is not actually Anglo-Saxon, it's actually Roman. And the Anglo-Saxons are building in this way in areas that were predominantly using small stones like this, which are mainly flint nodules. And this is the way the Anglo-Saxons were copying Roman building styles. Also, when you do see herringbone work like this on a Roman site, on sites that are displayed for the public, be very careful, because when you go to Tinkinswood Burial Chamber in the Vale of Glamorgan, what you do see, the archaeologist J. Ward excavated in 1914, he found that the lower walls, the Neolithic lower walls at Tinkinswood, were horizontal beds of stone laid in a dry stone format. And he decided in 1914 to show the difference between the original and the reconstructed. He was to put herringbone there, right? So the herringbone at Tinkinswood is not Anglo-Saxon. And also similarly at St. Peter's Church in the Vale of Glamorgan at Cogan Hall Farm, that's the same thing, where you do find that for example, that in the 1850s, 1860s, 1880s, 1890s, the original stonework, which was horizontal beds, when they reconstructed it, they obviously used herringbone to indicate what had been reconstructed and what hasn't. So, in other words, herringbone is actually an architectural style of the Romans that the Anglo-Saxons have copied. So finally, what I would like to do is I would like to clear that from the screen. Just a few little points. And what we've got is that we got Rinksworth Church. And Ringsworth Church is a rather interesting church, like all of these sites. And I'm going to get my notes up on the screen. It's St. Mary's Church at Ringsworth. Now, what we see at St. Mary's Church at Ringsworth is that the church dates back to the 700s. The stonework that you can actually see in front of us is actually in the porch. And what happened was that when the church was being reconstructed and restored in 1820 and then in 1870, they wanted to build a porch. So what did they find in the church graveyard? Bucket loads and bucket loads of wonderful carved stone, which was from the Anglo-Saxon period, which had been taken away when they were doing much earlier rebuilds in the medieval. They demolished the Anglo-Saxon church. They piled it up somewhere, and somebody said, "Oh wow, look at these! We can use these in the reconstruction of the porch." And that's exactly what they did at Ringsworth in Derbyshire, right? So all these wonderful carved stones, and even with this, you can actually see where the Anglo-Saxons are actually copying a Roman type of column plinth, not plinth, a capital. And you can clearly see that's almost somebody who's working in using carpentry tools, but to sort of recreate like a timber column capital. And this is typically what you would use. This is typically what you'd carve into timber, not stone. Timber, not stone. These designs in timber, not stone. But this is what survived the work in stone. So moving on a little bit further, and we go to, there we go. This is Ringsworth, and very, very interestingly enough as well, is that not only is the church known for its Anglo-Saxon carvings in the porch, we've got a large Anglo-Saxon coffin lid that was discovered in 1820 that's been rebuilt into one of the walls inside the church as part of the restoration. So again, this is an Anglo-Saxon coffin lid that's been reused in the restoration of the church. So, and then finally, there's Ringsworth Church. It doesn't look Anglo-Saxon, but they've got loads of Anglo-Saxon fabric. And this is also very, very interesting. This is known as the Tywide Man, the oldest known representation of a miner in Britain. There we go. Doesn't he look great? Yeah. That could be a miner anyway. That's a miner in Derbyshire, mining the ironstone and the coal. That could be a miner down in Cornwall. And just a little bit about this chap. Hang on a minute.
We've not seen that.
Are you not seeing it?
No.
But hang on a minute. You've just seen that. You've just seen the coffin lid. Hang on a minute.
Yeah, we're at that.
And there he is.
Yeah, got him.
I'm glad you told me that, because that's really important feature of what we're doing today. So that's the Tywide Man from Ringsworth. And I'm just going to get my notes up here, which should be here. Being the only representation, the oldest representation of a miner anywhere in Britain, it says the world, but I don't actually think it is. But this was carved in the Anglo-Saxon period. And this is on display in this church, but it was actually moved to this church in 1863 from another church known as Bonsall Church. It was placed into this church for safekeeping. So what we have, we've got all the reuse of Anglo-Saxon stone in this church for rebuilding in the porch and other things. And then finally, the last image today is of, not that, hang on a minute, we've already done all that. So this is also, this is actually at Bakewell Church in Derbyshire, also in Derbyshire. And this is also in the porch. And quickly, my notes tell me, in connection with Bakewell, that again, the church definitely dates all the way back to the 900s. And they found all these bits of Anglo-Saxon carved stone at Bakewell in Derbyshire in the church graveyard. So they basically gathered these stones together to be constructed into their porch. And if you look at this, this is the last sort of wave of what I want to say today. If you look at this, most of this does not look like what anything that the Anglo-Saxons would have created. What they've done, they've copied styles and created all these crosses for the church graveyard. All these crosses have been destroyed and bits of stonework from the church. They've gathered all this together to be constructed into a porch in the early part of the 1800s. So again, more reuse of Anglo-Saxon stone in Bakewell, and a nice little figure in the middle. So what we'll do, we'll call that a day now, right? So are there any questions? First of all, from Henri.
I was just asking, with the carving of the miner, what type of mining would they have been doing at that time?
Derbyshire, there are limited. There is limited coal mining, but if you look at that, if you do look at the tool he's actually using, that looks more like a hammer with an adze on the end, more used to in the mining industry for iron rather than coal.
Right.
That's not like a pick. That would do more damage to ironstone rather than if that was to mine coal, that end would need to be more pointed. It wouldn't look like that.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't.
Okay.
You could get away with a hand tool. That looks more meaty. That does look more meaty. And obviously, yes. So that looks more like for ironstone rather than coal. But then again, the bucket tells me coal. So I would go for ironstone, actually. Anything else you want to ask, Henri?
No, that's great. I enjoyed that. Thank you.
I'm glad you did. It's a shame about all the other lectures you don't enjoy, but that's fine. Right, Goff, what about you?
No questions on that. That's very interesting. Thank you.
My pleasure. And Mike, you got the last word.
It's good.
Oh,
It's good.
Mike's all right. So, okay then.
Wait
Next
for chips and
week.
faggots.
He's going to get ready for the faggots. So he's stretching his legs. So I'm going to say next week we're going to do the battlefields of the American Civil War, which will be the archaeology. Thanks for joining us this week. And if there's no more questions from you, Henri and Goff, forever keep your peace. If there's nothing else, and if there's nothing else, then
There's nothing else.
there's nothing
There's
else.
nothing
All right
else.
then. I'm going to say
Bye-bye.
goodbye to Goff and Henri, and hopefully
Bye
Jane will be with us next week. Take care, guys.
All right.
Bye.
bye.
Enjoy your week.
See you
Bye.
soon.
Bye.
Take care, Henri. Have a great week. Yeah, and you as well. Bye. Cheers. Okay, thank you very much for joining us on YouTube, and that's the end of the lecture for today.